Welcome into press coverage. Dan Hope joined by Andy Anders to recap the 2025 NFL draft for Ohio State, which was a prolific draft for the Buckeyes, tying their school record with 14 total selections. 4 first-round picks, Emeka Egbuka, Donovan Jackson, Tyleik Williams, and Josh Simmons. 3 second-round picks, Quinshon Judkins, TreVeyon Henderson, and JT Tuimoloau. 3 fourth-round picks in Cody Simon, Lathan Ransom, and Jack Sawyer. 3 fifth-round picks in Jordan Hancock, Denzel Burke, and Ty Hamilton. Will Howard rounding things out in the 6th round for Ohio State to match its school record from 2004 for the most players selected in a single NFL draft. Ohio State coming up just 1 pick short of tying Georgia's record for the most players selected in a 7-round NFL draft. And while there's certainly a lot to celebrate for Ohio State this weekend that we're going to get into, a slight disappointment that Ohio State wasn't able to match that record, because going into the weekend, all the projections were that Ohio State was going to have 15 players drafted, but falling 1 short of that as Seth McLaughlin, who I think certainly would have been drafted if not for the Achilles tear that ended his senior season, goes undrafted, ultimately signing with the Cincinnati Bengals, a drop that I think certainly resulted from his injury and not being able to do any testing or anything in the pre-draft process. But Andy, I know you have some thoughts on Seth McLaughlin going undrafted.
Yeah, man, the man won the Remington. I feel like Seth McLaughlin got a little bit underserved there, but I understand coming off an Achilles tear, that's going to impact how teams are evaluating. It's a really tough injury to recover from, to get back to 100% from. But when Seth is at his best, you heard him referred to as a pro by Ryan Day, by Will Howard on multiple occasions last year. He has the mental faculties that you look for at center, that knowledge of the game, the ins, the outs. So I was a little bit upset to see him go undrafted, but I was not upset to see the Bengals sign him as an undrafted free agent because, as many of our listeners might know, I am a Bengals fan. So it was good to see them scoop him up, especially because it was overall a disappointing draft for the Bengals, at least for my end. I feel like they reached on some picks, but this isn't a Bengals podcast, Dan. This is an Ohio State podcast, so I will keep my my complaints about the Bengals drafting at a minimum. My complaints about Seth McLaughlin not getting drafted, though, at a maximum.
Unfortunate for Seth McLaughlin and for Ohio State, because I think if not for that injury, I think he certainly would have been drafted, probably would have been a middle round pick. And if so, we would be talking about Ohio State tying the record for the most NFL draft picks all time with 15 selections, but still a great draft for the Buckeyes, starting with 4 first-round picks, Emeka Egbuka, Donovan Jackson, Tyleik Williams, and Josh Simmons. Andy, out of those 4 first-round picks, is there any one of them in particular that really stands out to you as a good fit for those guys?
Yeah, for me, it's Emeka, because you get to play alongside Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, right? That Tampa Bay receiving core is just loaded now, ridiculous. And I think some people were even a little surprised to see them go there, but you know, that compliment to what Mike Evans and Chris Godwin can do. And Emeka talked at his post-game press conference, not post-game, apologies, post-draft press conference about the fit. And that was the first thing he said about why he was excited, and getting to learn from Godwin, who has been such a dynamic weapon out of the slot in his NFL career, is coming off of an injury. But for me, I think the way that Emeka approaches the game, it's clear his mental, his dedication, whether he is playing on the outside and if they want to keep Godwin in the slot, or if he is in the slot and they put Godwin on the outside, I think you have a less pressure to be that guy from the jump when there's veterans that good flanking you. You know, there's not all this pressure where Emeka is going to have to carry the passing game, the receiving game. So to me, I think that's the best fit for the Buckeyes. Dan, is there another of the guys that stands out as a best fit for you?
I think both offensive linemen landed in good spots, and I'm not just saying that because I predicted it in my pre-draft mock, but I think Donovan Jackson. You look at that Minnesota Vikings offensive line; they really have a pretty good line. They just needed to fill in that left guard spot. I think that he can go in there, fill that spot seamlessly, and I think that'll be a really good fit for him. Going to a winning team where he can go contribute immediately as a starter, and then for Josh Simmons. For him, coming off an injury, I think going to the Chiefs is a team where, there's not going to be a ton of immediate pressure for where he has to contribute right away. But ultimately, if he can be that starting left tackle, if they expect him to be, I mean, what better job is there for a starting left tackle than being the guy protecting Patrick Mahomes? So I think for Josh Simmons, while he's another guy like Seth McLaughlin, who probably would have gone higher if not for the injury, I think it could end up being a blessing in disguise for him because you're going to a team where you're going to have a chance to compete for Super Bowls every year. And that's always a good spot to be in. So you certainly like that for Josh Simmons. I think, if you move on to the second round, some fun fits is there as well, especially for the two running backs who were drafted. A lot of Ohio football fans probably excited about the fact that Quinshon Judkins will be playing for the Cleveland Browns. And, they certainly needed another running back with Nick Chubb not being retained. And I think he'll have an opportunity to go in there with Jerome Ford and play a lot right away. And then TreVeyon Henderson going to New England, which is a team that, needs offensive weapons. I mean, I look at their roster and I say, TreVeyon Henderson might be their best offensive player right away. Like, I think that's very, very feasible, where I think, that's a team you needed to add weapons around Drake May. The Patriots, particularly the first 2 days of the draft, their entire draft strategy was built around giving more help to Drake May, their second-year quarterback. And I think TreVeyon Henderson, not just with his home run hitting running ability, but his blocking his ability to catch out of a backfield. I think he's going to be a major asset to that New England offense.
Yeah, both those running backs. And it was interesting, the conversation entering the draft, too, about who was going to be RB2 between TreVeyon Henderson, Quinshon Judkins, and Omarion Hampton. I think Omarion Hampton kind of the favorite there and does end up being the second running back off the board. But really good situations to go into, or really good fits, at least, for the reasons you mentioned. And for Browns fans, I know it's got to inject some juice back into that backfield after you've lost Nick Chubb and saw the highs of the highs. There were times when Nick Chubb was one of the best running backs in the league, but unfortunately has the injury difficulties, ends up leaving the team in free agency. And I think now you get an Ohio guy back, an Ohio State national champion back in your backfield. And Quinshon's a fun runner to watch, man, too. It's that physical downhill style, the stiff arms. We saw it play out this year, obviously, at Ohio State. But I think for how the Browns are going to need to attack and trying to figure out that quarterback situation, of course, too, as always. I really like the excitement that Quinshon can bring to that fan base, frankly. And TreVeyon, the explosive abilities, we've talked about it before. Like you said, the pass protection, which was one of the main things I was going to bring up about him, and one of the main things that seemed to stand out as a separator for NFL teams throughout his pre-draft process. That is really helpful to have alongside a young quarterback like a Drake May, and really underrated too, to be able to pick up those free rushers on the blitz and give that extra second to deliver a ball. It makes all the difference in the NFL. And so I think TreVeyon Henderson is the kind of player that you think back, it was Bill Belichick used to, build his foundations upon some of those higher character individuals at times. And TreVeyon's one of those, I think. So really good looks for both of those running backs for Ohio State.
Now, outside of Seth McLaughlin, I think the slides that were the most surprising to us was seeing Jack Sawyer fall into the 4th round, Will Howard fall into the 6th round. And, we've said it before. I mean, I think Jack Sawyer should have gone higher. I think, him falling because of, short arms or whatever reason it is. I think he could certainly make a lot of teams regret the fact that they let him fall to the 4th round. I think same with Will Howard. I think, he's a guy who, you saw it during Ohio State's national championship run. He's a gamer. Maybe he doesn't have the elite arm or, elite physical traits that, make an early round quarterback prospect. But I think that, he's a guy that, both of those guys are guys that you just know they're going to give it their all and they're going to get the most out of themselves beyond whatever limitations they have. And I think while I'm sure it was disappointing to stay on the board as long as they did, I think they both landed in a great spot for them. Maybe not a great spot for you, Bengals fan Andy Anders, but I think for them as players and people, I think the Pittsburgh Steelers are a great fit for those guys, because you just think of what the Steelers have always been known for their toughness, their grittiness. I think that Jack Sawyer and Will Howard are both guys who really fit that perfectly. And I think especially for Will Howard, I mean, I think, for falling to the 6th round, I don't think he could have landed in a better spot, because you're talking about a team that still doesn't have a starting quarterback for 2025. Now, maybe Aaron Rodgers will be that guy, but who knows? I mean, it's Aaron Rodgers. Like, that guy could go on Pat McAfee's show and say anything. You don't know what you're going to get with that guy. And so if Aaron Rodgers goes on the Pat McAfee show next week and says, I'm retiring, all of a sudden, like, it's not out of the question that Will Howard could become the Pittsburgh Steelers starting quarterback. I mean, he'd only have to beat out Mason Rudolph. I'm not saying I think that's going to happen. He's a 6th round pick, so we need to be realistic about expectations. But I do think that, you figure even if they do ultimately sign Aaron Rodgers, he's probably a guy that's only going to be there for a year, 2 years at most. And so I think Will Howard landed in a position where, even though he fell down the board, he's with a team where, if all goes right, if he develops the way that he's capable of, there's a path for him to playing a big role for the Steelers in the future. Nothing guaranteed whatsoever, because he's a 6th round pick. But I mean, hey, we saw Tom Brady do it. I mean, we've seen Brock Purdy do it. Once in a while, a late round pick at quarterback ends up becoming a star for their team. And I'm not going to put that past Will Howard, because I know the guy is going to go in there. He's going to work his butt off, and he's going to be very competitive. He's going to go in there believing that he can be the future starting quarterback of the Pittsburgh Steelers. We'll see where that ultimately happens, but that he's going to put his best foot forward to try to make that happen.
Right. Of course, it'll be vital that he makes himself known as a contender, at least in the future. If Aaron Rodgers is that starter this year, doesn't go on the Pat McAfee podcast and retire. I think Will's going to position himself well if he can just get his boots on the ground. We saw it. The longer he is with his receivers and gets comfortable and develops, that is when Will is at his best. And I think that some of that might have been lost in the throwing performance at the scouting combine. When we watched him at Ohio State's Pro Day, he was excellent with receivers that he was familiar with. And it was, again, you go back to that difference from spring to fall, his year at Ohio State, and how quickly that chemistry grew on the outside. So as he gets boots on the ground in Pittsburgh, I'm going to be rooting hard against him in the NFL when he's playing the Bengals, at least. But good for Will, and I do think it's an excellent fit for that reason, because for a 6th rounder to quarterback to have that much leeway to playing time, or a good path where you are going to have a chance to win this job here soon and maybe get a year or two of development before that. It's a good situation for Will. And with Jack, you think about, there have been great Buckeye Steelers, a lot of them recently. Cam Hayward comes to mind, right? Stalwart defensive end for the Steelers for so long, and what he's done. You hope Jack can have a similar career trajectory, even after a bit of a slip in the draft, to end up as that 4th round selection. And I agree with you. I agree with you as far as feeling Jack a little undervalued in this draft. I think sometimes teams get too caught up in those measurables. They get talked up a little bit too much. Yes, is it important for defensive ends to have long arms? Sure. But there are so many other things that go into playing the position. And again, I think Jack's run defense consistently gets underrated. He was one of the best, if not the best, run defending defensive end in college football last year. We talked about him having that sort of Sam Hubbard career trajectory before, and I really think the Steelers have the acumen to make that work in their defense, although the scheme fit might be a little tenuous there.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see how they utilize Jack Sawyer because, they are a defense that's typically been a free four defense primarily. TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, their current starters there who both, play primarily as outside linebackers. Now, at the same time, just like we're going to see at Ohio State this year, the NFL, most teams run multiple defenses now. And so you don't have to use Jack Sawyer as an outside linebacker. They did announce Jack Sawyer as an outside linebacker. So my one concern there would be, if they plan to play Jack Sawyer as an outside linebacker, can he make that transition successfully? Because we saw in 2022 when Jim Knowles attempted to make him a Jack linebacker at Ohio State, that didn't really utilize his skill set in the best way. So, I'll be interested to see how that plays out. But, if Derek Harmon coming in there as their first round pick for Pittsburgh, playing alongside Cam Hayward, maybe that's more reason for them to do more, four-man front stuff anyways. And since, Jack's going in there in a situation where he's probably not going to be a starter right away, you could have a package for Jack Sawyer that utilizes him to his strengths. And, like you said, I think, the Steelers are a team that's, consistently gotten the best out of players. They've had a lot of guys who have come in as middle round picks and who have gone on to have very good careers in Pittsburgh. And so, I do believe that Jack is going to be successful in Pittsburgh. And I think they have the right kind of culture, but I think he's going to be a perfect fit for with everything we know about Jack. We talked about Quinshon Judkins going to Cleveland earlier. The Cleveland Browns now have 7 Buckeyes on their roster. The Arizona Cardinals also have 7 Buckeyes on their roster as they drafted Cody Simon and Denzel Burke and also signed Josh Fryer. And so Arizona, we've seen them really become a fan of Ohio State in recent years. They drafted Paris Johnson Jr. 2 years ago. They drafted Marvin Harrison Jr. a year ago. Now drafting a couple more Buckeyes. Cool for Denzel in particular is he is from Phoenix, Arizona. So, he grew up right near there where the Cardinals play. Now he gets to go back home. And then Cody Simon, I mean, I said it in our pre-draft show last week that, I thought he was a better prospect than Tommy Eichenberg. Tommy Eichenberg was a 5th round pick. And so I think a lot of people were surprised to see Cody, be the first Buckeye off the board on day 3. But I really wasn't, because I think with how well Cody played this past season and another guy who brings all those great intangibles to the table, I'm not surprised that he went in the 4th round. And, certainly Arizona has seen something it likes in Ohio State players and has brought a lot of them in. And, even Josh Fryer is an undrafted guy, is notable that it was reported on Sunday that at least as of the contracts that have been processed at that time, Josh Fryer got the 3rd most guaranteed money of any undrafted free agent. So you pair that with him going to a team where his offensive line coach is now going to be someone who knows him really well, in former Ohio State offensive line coach Justin Fry. And Josh Fryer, even though he went undrafted, might have a chance to make that roster in Arizona.
Yeah, and not only a coach that knows him well, a coach that really brought his best play out of him this past season. We talked about the holes that Josh fixed in his game this last year. I still don't think we ever saw the full ceiling of Josh Fryer at Ohio State, because down the stretch of this last season, he was dealing with an injury. That was something that was kind of revealed after the year, or even in the national championship locker room celebration. But Josh dealing with that lower body injury really turned into the stalwart of that offensive line, the only starter from the beginning of the year, sticking at his original position full time in that way. Everyone else moving around or rotating in the case of Tabor Shabola on that offensive line, or losing guys to injuries. And can't understate really what the journey that Josh Fryer's been on to overcome injuries at Ohio State, play through injuries like he did during the CFP run. Guy that dealt with a lot of online harassment after some struggles earlier in his career, and the way fans can kind of take things too far sometimes. Don't want to belabor those points. Focused on the future with Josh. I think having this is the perfect situation for him with Justin Fry as the offensive line coach, and even getting to go there and be with Paris Johnson Jr., who used to be in his offensive line room with him, and to be with all of those other Ohio State teammates. It'll be exciting, too, to see practice battles renewed between Denzel Burke and Marvin Harrison Jr. Speaking of defensive backs, though, I think I talked going into the draft a lot about Jordan Hancock. I feel like being underrated, and I feel like a 5th-round pick for him is a steal, although it was – it makes sense with where he was projected. I don't think anyone was surprised to see him be a 5th-round pick per se. But to me, I really feel like Jordan Hancock was a day 2 talent with all the things he can do on the defensive side of the ball, how important that versatility is in the modern NFL schemes and stopping these modern NFL passing offenses, and the athleticism that he showed at Ohio State's Pro Day, and throughout the draft process. To me, I think the Bills got a steal there in the 5th round and a versatile piece that you can fit into a lot of places in your secondary, which I think makes it even more valuable.
Yeah, Jordan Hancock, one of 7 Buckeyes who was called on day 3 in the 4th round there. Cody Simon along with Jack Sawyer and Lathan Ransom, Jordan Hancock with Ty Hamilton and Denzel Burke in round 5, and then Will Howard, rounding out Ohio State's class of 14 draft prospects there on day 3 as they joined the 4 first-round picks we already talked about, as well as TreVeyon Henderson, Quinshon, Judkins, and JT Tuimoloau in the 2nd round, making for a deep draft class for Ohio State that certainly showed just how talented that Ohio State football team was last year that went on to win a national championship. So many of those guys could have been in the draft a year ago, chose to come back for one more year. Those decisions were rewarded with winning a national championship, and now rewarded once again with getting the call from the NFL. So it's going to be a lot of fun, Andy, watching these guys' careers. I mean, is there one player in particular, Andy, that you're just really excited to watch put on an NFL uniform this upcoming season?
This season, a few years down the road, Seth McLaughlin, baby, starting center for the Bengals. But this year, I think it's going to be Donovan Jackson, his story and what he did for the 2024 team, moving from guard to tackle, fills that clear and immediate need at left guard for the Vikings. And, it's not always considered exciting to watch the trenches for a lot of people, but I consider it exciting to watch the trenches and seeing how Donovan Jackson comes along in that left guard spot in his first year at the NFL level and tries to establish himself as a stalwart.
Yeah, I got to go TreVeyon Henderson. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch him, become probably the starting running back for the Patriots and a team that needs some offensive spark. I think he's going to be able to bring that to them. And then, of course, Jack Sawyer. I mean, we've talked him up a lot. I mean, just to see what he can become. Can he become that steal that we think he can be over there in Pittsburgh? I think there's going to be a lot of Buckeyes to watch in the NFL this year. It's we've had the opportunity to watch a lot of Buckeyes play in the league in recent years, and this year as much as ever with the new class of rookies that is in the league. So it's going to be fun to watch all those guys. Those are a couple in particular, but we're certainly going to be following all of them over at 11warriors.com as their rookie seasons in the NFL progress. We'll be back later this week with Real Pod Wednesdays. Ryan Day going to be meeting with the media on Tuesday, so should hear some interesting things from that, and we will have his press conference on the 11 Warriors YouTube channel on Tuesday as well. For now, this has been our NFL Draft Recap episode of Press Coverage. He's Andy Anders. I'm Dan Hope. We'll catch you next time.